Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being at this roundtable. So we will have a different talk about the user-centric design of tool in the humanitarian field. The idea of this roundtable is to introduce you different approaches that has been taken or are currently ongoing. And we will try to focus on this approach with the humanitarian sector requirements. So we hope that at the end of the session, you will be convinced that developing a user-centric tool is not that complex and it's necessary. So I'm really pleased to introduce you our three speakers for this morning. So we have Pauline from MSF. So she's a GeoMSF business project manager. We have Suleiman from GICHD. I don't remember the acronym of GICHD, but it's Demining Organization in Geneva, with Information Management Advisor. And we have Simon, with the hat of this morning is co-founder of Heqco Design. So I will let Pauline talking first.
Thank you, Sylvie, for the introduction. It's an honor to be here and to start with the first presentation from this roundtable. So my name is Pauline Emery. I work at Médecins Sans Frontières since May 2018, so 6 months. And I'm part of this project called GeoMSF, a GIS unit program for MSF. In this presentation, I'm going to explain to you what is the use of GIS nowadays in MSF, so Médecins Sans Frontières, the idea of the GeoMSF program, and where we are using the user-centric design approach in the humanitarian field, so answering to the question of this topic. So, GIS within MSF. It's, we should say, a 6-year story officially of GIS within MSF. In 2012, we had the first maps that were produced proactively for operation needs in the field. So as a resulting of PDFs and different thematic approach that were asked from the field on the headquarters to produce different maps, helping them in their operational needs. All this work was gathered in a map center, or a map repository, where we could find and use the different static maps that were created. In a couple of years, the added value of GIS, so it's really a journey of explaining also why GIS is important. We had like the real added value that was shown through this Ebola deployment. I'm sure you are recognizing who is in the picture there, because she presented me just before. And so it is really a journey of explaining why GIS and how they can help in the field through the operation of Médecins Sans Frontières. So Médecins Sans Frontières, as you know, it's of course medical, but also a lot of logistical and different other sectors that need actually to have a specific help in GIS deployment. So since 2016, the GIS unit was founded, and the idea is that we really have a center of excellence that is built for all the MSF movement. So here they are represented with the different names. So we have actually 5 operations centers in Brussels, Paris, Geneva, Barcelona, and Amsterdam. In 6 years, we saw really an evolving, a big evolution in the needs that were coming from the field. We started with static maps, answering really a need of where I am, how can I go, where I can where are the sectors that are maybe dangerous in a region on where a mission is deployed. Then more and more the needs of the willingness of having a simple visualization, having the interaction of the map came quickly. So just to say, okay, it's a PDF has a lot of interesting elements, but I want to interact more and have more identified features in the field for monitoring purposes. And so visualization on geo application are the first steps. And now we see that more and more the need or the demands, requests for elaborated gap analysis are coming. And those are already being deployed as a pilot with some different countries. But we see that we need a bit scale up of the resources and of the processes to put in place such analysis tools that combine not only GIS components but also more dashboard components. Therefore, the GeoMSF program. So the GeoMSF program is a 3-year program that is here to scale up or to help to scale up the GIS unit. The idea is that we really need robust IT infrastructure. So it's what is presented in the bottom part of this diagram of the 3 different pillars. And because without robust IT infrastructure, you can, it's really difficult to manage all the data synchronization and decentralized database and all the different challenges that come when you go in decentralized or remote places. In this program, we have to take care of 2 pillars for the users. So it's a geo portal, user-friendly geo portal, one-stop shop. So for a large public, the idea is really to gather all the useful information or information for the useful GIS information for MSF activities, and so have a place where people go to find geographically information systems, information data. And on the other part, we tackle more specific needs, so sector-specific, through geo products that can be services, toolkits, and different specialized application, as we saw on the top bottom part of the diagram before. So where are we in the program now? So program has 3 phases: initialization, development, and implementation. And that is, this diagram comes from our colleagues from Sweden innovation team, where we really see that we don't have a linear process to go through the different phases. So we start with a frame, research analysis, and then we want to go to iterative phases and finalizing with pilot and different elements through the last deployment. So nowadays the program started in February, so we are arriving at the last part of the initialization, and that's where I'm talking now with you through the user-centered approach. So what did we do in this initialization phase? We really have to identify the stakeholder, because we have well, you saw in the spectrum with the 2 main pillars on the top. We have on one part online geoportal, and on the other part sectorial data or sectoral geo-apps that have to be met. And it is an intersectional project, so we have to talk with different actors in different countries to be sure that that's what we are going to put in place is corresponding to people that they want. The challenge and also an opportunity is that it's an opt-in program, so we are not imposing anything. So we have to have actually good enough tools and processes so that people will start using it and seeing the added value. Why do we focus on user and context? It's because we really think that like that you can gather all the requirements that you need. And because we are also, as I said before, 6-year experience, we wanted to have the best practice in the humanitarian sectors. So we talked actually to a lot of different actors. When you do user requirements, then you have actually, if you do them well, then you are sure that it fits the user needs. And you have the user have a better understanding of the processes that you are putting in place, the complexity that is behind the scene, and for them it's also regarding active role, so to be actually in the process of developing a new tool. It's talking about in change management the awareness of what is going on. How we did the outreach? So we went through different processes, so interviews, workshops, surveys, and external analysis. The idea is that you cannot invest the same time and go deep in the different with this different outreach methodology. So at the beginning, we started with interviews because like that is one-to-one, but it's a lot of time effective, but you can go really deep into the details. So that's the key, really important to have key people knowing well the organization and knowing well the GIS or history, because being quite new in the organization, there is a time where you learn what is going on. Then we tackle workshops, so you have 5 to 10 people that will answer concrete example of, or do an assessment of what they have today and where they want to go with the tools, and seeing actually what is helping them to achieve this the goal where they want to go, and what is retaining them. So like that, you have an assessment also if what people are struggling with nowadays, and you can tackle better that into requirements. So the idea is to do like a flip over. If it's a constraint nowadays, then you make it a requirement. Surveys, it's like that. Thanks to the workshop, you can have the surveys that help you actually just be sure that what you heard during the workshop is really what everyone thinks. So that will be more for the GeoPortal aspect. And the GeoProducts, we ask a survey, but in a smaller scale, to people, for instance, that already went to a GIS training, so to have already a GIS awareness, because those products will be for this kind of assessment. All those gives a requirement gathering in different formats. The idea is really to classify them into, are they in or out of the scope of the project, because you are in talking to people, having brainstorms and going on. Classify them into domains to be sure that where they are going to be tackled inside the whole project, and then work with use cases to see actually if the requirement is actually just one part of a bigger use case that you can present and talk to people. The whole analysis will give, well, then the user design platform. The external analysis, it's something that I'm going to talk just now a bit more into details. The idea was really to say, okay, how can we take the best of the others, what is already going on the market? Not all of them have open platforms for GeoPortals, but we went through an assessment of seeing what people use nowadays within MSF, on the field or in HQ. And also we want to see, okay, what are different thematics or different platform styles that were used. The idea was really to ask also someone that is not GIS expert to see, okay, what is the usability, the map feature that you find, what was intuitive, what was difficult to struggle, did you understand the purpose of the platform quickly? Because we are tackling with the GeoPortal something big within MSF, MSF staff in general. And then we talked also to a lot in Geneva. We have the chance to have a lot of different actors in the humanitarian. So the list here, I hope it's not the final list, because we are now also doing GeoMSF. So please come to me afterwards if you want to share your GIS experience or use cases and lesson learned that you have. We are really humble to say, okay, let's just see what is going on and take the best of all the practices. And we saw really different setups that are made corresponding to the use case that were really done. So the next steps, so what we are going to continue with the user-centric approach during the development and the implementation phase, it's really to say, well, working with prototypes help, of course, to have this engagement of the stakeholders of smaller groups, see if it's working before launching really a first iteration or a first version of a platform or a geo product. So going step by step and avoiding to develop too big framework that won't work from the beginning with the different talks. So the user-centric approach that we really want to keep in mind is that you have actually those three criteria that are desirability, feasibility, and viability. And the best is, of course, to find the threshold between what people really want, what you can do with technology, and is it viable with on the business side of it. So we really want to keep in mind that we have in this project, on one side, general needs for the whole MSF staff. On the other side, specific needs for sectors. We have to find, we are talking to GIS specialists, but also to non-GIS specialists, so we have to tackle both approach. And I think even if we are GIS specialists, intuitive tools are always the best because you don't have then to invest too much in trainings and so on, so have a really nice workflow that have to go. A modern design, I think that's also something that we keep in mind. We've done a usability or users center or UX design etude and study, thank you. And we want to work with building blocks approach, so saying, okay, that works in one place, that works in the other. So main objective, keep it simple and talk to as much people as possible to make a tool that will fit. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Okay. How many of you actually know what MSMA is besides Florian there? Okay, not too much. So MSMA is actually an information management system for mine action programs. It's a software that has been undergoing so many cycles of development since 1999, I think. Started with Access, and now we have it as a Postgres database with a Java engine and ArcGIS engine to manage the GIS part. And this is, GICHD is one of the organization, actually, the caretaker of the system, plus other stuff in the mine action. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the new MSMA we are actually working on right now, which is Misma Core, and how we use the system, the user-centered approach to actually develop the Misma Core. So mine action, my action is by default is a geo-based approach. So we always have a spot, a minefield, a bomb, IED, whatever you call it, and many of you have saw that in the field if you work in the field. And it's always centered around an area. So we always have a lat long, maybe if we're lucky, we have actually a polygon where we have more information. And it's not just the hazard area. We have these guys who actually talk about the type of the bomb, of the type of the landmine, but that location, there's other elements that exist around that location that are affected by that one, where you have farming, schools, hospitals, religious places. So mine action was always about having the relationship between the population who live in that area and the hazard and the danger that exists within that area. So GIS is very vital in mine action. Also, mine action is driven by context. So we're not isolated. Mine action is not an isolated system that work independently from other systems. So we have big relationship with other clusters. So we're working with housing, working with population, food security, education. So there is always that relationship between mine action and other stakeholders, which usually, unfortunately, many of my colleagues who are technical, deminers and AUD guys, they forget that relationship. And they're more focused about how many devices I have disposed instead of actually how many people are using that land, or did I solve a problem associated with that hazard that existed in that area. So there's always that context, you know. So, and this is also, we use it a lot in setting up our priorities when we go and try to clear a land. So we told the people like, okay, why should I clear this area instead of that area? And this is where we consult with different partners, like, you know, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Transport, Irrigation, Agriculture. So all of these are different stakeholders are engaged and important for us. Also, the way that data integrate between mine action. You know, usually if you ask anybody who worked with mine action, especially ex-military guys, they care about the location of the hazards, how to get there, what type of it is, and how we can dispose of it, like, you know, and we get information. Now we're using something called land release, where we focus more about how we integrate the community itself of that area with the land itself. We use also the community liaison approach, where we go and talk to the community, explain them the danger itself, because sometimes it's difficult to go there and try to engage or to clear the land on timely manner. You know, some countries, minefields stay there marked and identified for 5, 6, 7 years, depend on the priority and the availability of funding and organization who are interested to go on there. So all of this data that we already have, you know, we need to build it in a way to tell the people how to use it properly, you know, to tell the operators where to go, to build up tasking list of area that we know we need to go there and conduct that clearance or removal of the hazards, or just conduct a survey, you know. So we have that information that exists, and this is where we see that data itself is not just a data just owned for the deminer, but it's also affect other sectors. So if we share, you know, so if one of the biggest problem that I usually face when discussing with the deminers is, how can I share data? You know, I received an email just a few days ago, like they asked me for polygons of, for one of the countries. I'm working a lot with Yemen, and they need some shape files, and which is already existing in other like in HDX, you can go and download all of the layers or the admin levels of Yemen, for example. But these guys don't know. They have no idea what is there. So because they live in their own bubble, like, okay, I'm a military unit, or I'm associated to a military or Ministry of Internal. I don't know what other people are doing. And this is a problem that we face a lot with many of the organizations we work with. And it's been historically a problem, so that mine action was kind of isolated from the rest. And not only that, like, you know, if I'm conducting a work in one preference and another organization conducting work in another preference, we really don't share information. So it's not just sharing information with other sectors, but also sharing information with the same organization or the same sector that we're working with. Also, an action provide a lot of information that require for the decision maker. So we need to provide that information, that data, in a timely manner to provide them, to help them, support them to make the right decisions. You know, should I send my spot task team? You know, if somebody find a bomb, let's say in a country in Europe, you know, they call usually the police. The police, they have a unit to go there and clearance. In some countries, organizations are doing this, like NGOs are doing this. You know, they have a hotline, and they decided, okay, we receive a call, somebody finds something in their yard or in the farm, and then we go and send a team just to dispose of this item. Because, you know, in different situations with mine action, we have what we call battle area that happens. Somebody drop a grenade or a rocket, and it's there, and it's just an isolated. So we need to provide this information to the right teams on time, with as much information related to their work. And this is something has been quite challenging with the previous systems that we use to provide more information. Not only that, I want information, like I'm an operation manager, I need information about who conducted work previously on this land, who did the survey, how trustworthy are they. So these are all information that it was always challenging for us to just drive it to the people who are using it. So with the Misma Core, we try to put the GIS in the hands of the decision makers. I had a quite discussion with my colleagues about this one. One of the biggest challenges in the Misma, the previous version that we used, you have to be a really good database guy, good GIS guy, just to go and infer a little bit information about your need. So we have the operation manager who needs some information about a certain area, and he have to send a task to his GIS or to his IM guy, IM officer, and please can you give me information? I need maps, I need statistics, and I need stuff. And if they have a big operation, like some programs, for example, in Iraq, they have more than 700 staff working, more than 100 team, and one GIS guy, if you're lucky. So imagine building all these maps, answering all these requests, all these tasks in timely manner. That was always a big challenge for us using the old systems. Reporting was not that easy. Actually, it's really difficult. I'm working trying to help countries to work with them, and it's always a challenge for me just to do the reporting. So we need a way to actually help this operation manager to open a dashboard, just select where he wants to work, get the information, to see the map with the previous information of hazards, what type of devices were found, a little bit historical data, then population number. Was there any risk education happened to that population? Who's the community liaison officer who can help us facilitate to go there? Having a simple, it's just, a simple thing like that. We call it task dossier in some countries. Have it in front of me, and I'm as operation manager, not IM guy, are able to do that. It's something was a dream for us. And now with the new technology that we have, especially we're partnering with a big organization like Esri to help us to do that. What people don't understand, like, mine action in Iraq, mine action in Afghanistan, mine action in South Sudan, mine action in Somalia, they're totally different. That's not true. It's the same information, the same data, just different stakeholders, different names, different labels. So regardless of where you work, it's almost the same. We're not getting away of what's the difference between this program or that program. It's the same issue, the same challenges, different actors. That's the biggest difference. So with Misma Core, what we try to do, we try to build up a knowledge base of templates and tools that people can use based on their need, instead of redesigning everything, instead of forcing them with a system to work with. This is the form that you have to use. We have something called inspirational forms for different activity, and it have a lot of information. Like, for example, the vegetation of the land. If I'm working in Western Sahara, there's no vegetation. Why do I have in my form a vegetation block where, different type of vegetation, type of trees, and people have to select? So instead of having like 2 pages, 3 pages form, I have 12 pages form. So the idea was, how we can work with people designing Misma Core. So, to have, mine action is geographic. Mine action is driven by context. So we have to understand what the sector needs, provide a set of minimum data requirement, our indicators that we all share. Square meters, number of beneficiaries, type of beneficiary, direct, indirect, gender-based information. And then we have what decision makers need and what they're almost all the same. If I'm the director of program in Azerbaijan, there's no difference between the director in Libya. I have the same requirements. So we have to understand what users' specific needs. And the overall process, we're conducting this IM stakeholder workshops. And based on this one, we conduct different assessment and requirement. Based on the feedback, we design and reconfigure the tools that we got from Esri to meet their needs, and eventually we train and migrate the system to them. So the IM stakeholders is a really great way to do that. So we gather a bunch of people in a room, and usually they're not only from the mine action community. So we have Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Planning, Ministry of Agriculture's representatives are sitting in the same room, and we are talking about issues. We have people from the NGOs, people from the military, people from the mine action also. So all of them sharing and discussing stories, their experience. So they're crucial to what we are trying to build. And then we start to get more about the requirement, understand what their needs. I'm not going to go a little bit this one. And there's so many tools there's so many IM tools exist already. And we just select what actually can help us to help the user to achieve what they need, So using these, this is one of my colleagues, she put this presentation. So the most important person for us is the people, the users. They are the one that actually will be using the system. So, and listening to their stories, we can actually come with a good system that help them to do their job better. So we come out with a lot of process maps. Process maps is very essential because they explain how data is driven from one side to another side. And the result of the IM stakeholders, we have more user engagement. Instead of having one GIS or one IM guy, we have the whole operation team are using it. Not just only the operation manager, but also people in the field, team leaders who are using the systems and getting data. Before they go, they have this tablet, they download the data that they need, they go to the field, they see the parameter of the hazard area they're working with, they understand how to do that, they have better planning. And instead of actually recoding a program, we're just reconfiguring systems that exist already in the market. So we're not really creating a new software. We did that for 20 years, and we have a lot of issues. We have a lot of success. I'm not saying this was a failure, but the challenges was extreme and costly. So we have to change our approach. And with the Misma Core, we are actually in that direction. And for me, I think it's the right direction. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Simon, and before the last year I worked in information management for HDX and the British Red Cross and very much had a GIS background. But in the last year I've had a complete crash course in human-centered design. And this came about originally, my wife was working on a project called, she's trained in human-centered design, and this was Project Balance. It was for a 150-year-old manufacturing company who builds stair lifts for people's homes to get them up the stairs when they lose their mobility. They wanted to move into a new market, the digital area, but they still wanted to be working on their sort of expertise. And the project came to understanding your balance. Much like your weight, you can put a figure on that. You know if you're underweight, you know if you're overweight. And the same can actually be done with balance, but that language doesn't exist. Those numbers for it doesn't exist. So this was a project about using accelerometer in the phone to measure your balance as you stand on one foot and stand on the other. And then I got involved because a lot of numbers were coming out of the accelerometer. My background's in quantitative, so my wife asked me whether I could help communicate all these numbers that are coming out. And it turns out balance is a lot more complicated than weight. It has 4 attributes. Your balance on your left foot can be very different to your balance on your right foot. You can sway back and forth more compared to how you sway side to side. And it varies a lot more than weight does day to day. So together, we came up with this visualization. In green is your left foot, in blue is your right foot. The vertical axis represents your balance moving back and forth, and then side to side is your side to side balance, and then the dashes represent your balance over different days. And here we can see what a faller looks like, someone who falls over a lot, compared to someone who has good mobility. So this was my first time sort of getting into this more human-centered design. And I'm going to talk about some of the methods we used. But what actually happened, here's my wife, Shruti. So she's an expert in this. And we decided to bring together our skills, mine being quantitative and humanitarian, and Shruti's being qualitative and health sector. So we actually started last year a design studio called Heqco Design. Since then, we've worked on a few projects across the health and humanitarian sector. We worked with intravenous drug users in California for a Silicon Valley startup. we worked with MSF to help design a new innovation portal and strategy, and that took us to Kenya and Ethiopia. And recently, we worked with the Wellcome Trust to define a new priority area that they want to fund. And we actually just finished this contract on Friday, so I'm going to dive into some of the tools we use, because they can be used in any instance, and how we went about the process. So the Wellcome Trust are the second biggest funder in the world after the Gates Foundation. Their fund is worth about 26 billion. And they were looking to invest £15 million into open source tooling to help enable health innovation. So we had 8 weeks to define what their tooling they should invest in. And the method we used is called the Double Diamond Method. So this is created by the British Design Council. It has 4 stages: discover, define, develop, and deliver. And the idea is, in the first stage, you just dive into the problem. You create loads of ideas, as many as you can. Then you try to define those ideas down into just a few of them to take forward. Once you have 2 or 3 ideas that you think is worthwhile, you expand your knowledge on those vastly, so you go real into detail, and then finally bring them all together to deliver one single project. So the Wellcome Trust were looking to build an open source community to enable health innovation. So we came up with 25 initial value propositions, and these are just high-level ideas. They included opening up electronic health records, because there's a wealth of data in those that aren't used. Explaining AI algorithms to clinicians. If AI is going to have an impact in health, clinicians have to trust the outputs it's giving them while they're operating on patients. So we came up with a range of these. And then we worked with the team at Wellcome to prioritize what they thought was really in scope for them to fund and what wasn't. And this really helped us understand what the clients wanted from the problem as well. So we had 10 that were strongly in scope, and then we had some that weren't. So we took these into user interviews as cards that the users could then comment on, thought what would be most useful to them and what wouldn't. So we spoke to private institutions working in health data. We spoke to research institutions such as MIT and UCLH and the Alan Turing Institute. And we also were looking into open source community builders as well. So we spoke to the Humanitarian Data Exchange. As part of the interview, we went through their journeys of data. So we got them to map out 2 previous projects and highlight where those pain points in the projects were. So we were looking where tools can be made to help make their life easier. And then we were also looking for an overall theme to work on, and you can see some of them here. So after we carried out 22 interviews, we created this Postit Note wall. In green represents opportunities that they think tools can help their work. Orange represent pain points, stuff that they previously found really difficult and painful to work on. And the blue and orange ones represent contexts and stories that will help us build our solution. We actually divided this into 12 themes in the end, and sub-themes below that. And these are 12 themes that we then took to the Wellcome team to work out which 2 or 3 we wanted to take forward. So we held a workshop where they picked which 2 or 3 to take forward, and we dived into those in more detail. In parallel, we started to look at other open source communities, and we used this method called value flow models. And this is understanding how different actors work in an ecosystem, what value they add, and what value they take. So here we're looking at the OpenStreetMap community, where we have private institutions using it from Microsoft, Uber, and Mapbox, all providing different things. I'm sure we all know about the software Mapbox provides. Microsoft providing satellite imagery, Uber now adding turn directions to help improve their own routing. And then we have the other side of the equation about the NGOs and open source community, the NGOs using the open data to help them map in areas where the maps don't exist. And these together will create quite a diverse ecosystem. But we also went through some other open source communities, and this method was really good for highlighting which ones were fragile, which ones had a single point of failure, that if that funding was removed, then you could see how it was flowing through the whole system, that everyone was dependent on that funding. So this was an incredibly useful tool for us to quickly understand different communities so we could build one that worked for ourselves. So with the 3 areas, we then dived into more detail. This included creating user stories, creating a range of tools that might exist in there, and also quotes that we feel really highlight the value it adds. We then went back to our users who highlighted which stories they felt resonated most with them, so we knew those are the ones to build on, and also building a roadmap of tooling that would help us prioritize the project on what we should work first. So that was we sort of did this process over 8 weeks, but these tools can be used again and again in different projects. Another project we worked on for MSF was designing their new innovation portal. So they went to their funders and they said, we want this portal, and they went with a spec. The funders came back and said, you need to do some design work beforehand, and we were brought in at this stage. And actually, where we started was very different to where we ended up. The thing I want to highlight in this project was we actually built prototype mobile application and a website very quickly for £5,000, and that actually really changed our idea of what they needed in the field. So it consisted of 2 parts. MSF were really interested in collecting all these great ideas that were happening in the field. So we created an application where people could go in on different themes, say operating theatre, and enter a new topic and a new idea on that, and then have a discussion underneath. And then there was a second part to the website, which consisted of sharing successful small innovations in the field that had worked in a sort of how-to instruction, sort of like a recipe, like you need these ingredients, and these are the steps. And they were incredibly simple, from how to waterproof a concrete sanitation tank to more complicated ones around open mobile data collection. And what we actually found was the data collection of ideas didn't resonate with the field at all that much, despite that being one of the main things that MSF wanted. So we actually completely changed the idea of what needed to be in the portal. And at the same time as well, we created this card game. Each of the cards represented a topic or a function within an MSF role. We can see the operating theatre one, but there'd be like laundry. And these cards you can create really cheap. They're actually business cards where you can do a customized back to your business card, but we just used that as the front. And for £10, you can have a pack of customized cards for a workshop. And so we took these into groups, and people could talk about their role. So originally when we showed a doctor, it's like, why is laundry in there? Why are we speaking about laundry at MSF? But what it was an invitation to anyone in any role to speak about what they think can be improved. And that card was actually used later on by someone doing infection prevention control. So it was a real invitation, creating a space that people can talk around. So in the end, we decided not to have this portal collecting up ideas, but rather we saw so many innovations and clever things happening in the field that we wanted to amplify the second half, which was sharing what's working that might not have the sort of written up rules by centralization, central office on how to do it. An example is mobile data collection was done in 2013, 2014, we heard, but they hadn't had the guidelines written up even in 2018. But we quickly created a page where a few people were sharing the different methods they're using, and it was incredibly popular with those in the field. And we also changed the portal as well, because in the field we found there was this team of excellent people, all different specializations. They were already creating their own solutions in ad hoc ways. And what we suggested was they should be sharing those more, and ones that are working, the centralized units should be looking to scale across different projects. And this was sort of the final wireframes of some of the project we came up with. So what I want to talk now is bringing some of these back to the humanitarian sphere and some of the things I was guilty of before, which I'm hopefully not going to do going forward. So what we have here is a 3W dashboard, which I used to push a lot. So it's definitely better than spreadsheets that were handed out at first, which could have 5,000 rows that were really hard to get information out of. But when we started to really look at the statistics behind this, not many people actually click around. People look at the initial sort of outlay of the dashboard, but not many people are interacting with it. And the same has been found by New York Times, who are the best at these sort of interactive things. Is a huge segment of users are not actually deriving value from these. So what I'm starting to think about now is what can we do beyond dashboards? So I'm starting to come up with quite a few prototypes. What we have here is I'm starting to think, for some users, they really want narrative reports. And what we're doing here is generating these on the fly with data, written paragraphs about 3W. So here you can see we filtered to nutrition, and it automatically generates a small narrative generates a map and a graph relevant to that. So it's less interaction, less complicated. You just click on the topic you're interested in, and then it will generate a report. So I'd really like what people take away with this is maybe with dashboards, they're not the final place we should be at, but what products can we prototype, can we create quickly to understand how to reach all users? So when we design for, say, making a station, we were designed to make it work for those who are blind, those who in a wheelchair, those big and those small. So maybe when we create our digital products, we should be designing for the extreme users, the users who aren't going to click everywhere, the users who do want to dive in all the detail. And if you design for these extreme users, it's probably going to work for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh. Thank you all for your good presentation. I have some questions, but I would like to give the floor to the audience. We have, I think, 20 minutes for an open discussion. So please feel free to. Thank you.
Hi, thanks for that. Those were 3 really interesting and different stories. It strikes me that all 3 of you are sort of working in a way solving business process problems, or maybe another way to put it is helping to improve existing processes. And I use the word business process, maybe that's not the right word, but so I guess my question is, for any that want to answer, how do you specifically design to solve and improve an existing business process, an existing procedure that has to take place?
I think I will take the mic. That's actually a very good question, and it's quite challenging. One of the biggest challenges that I face going and working with other partners and worldwide, like, to identify or to recognize that there's a problem. And when I go to any program or any country or any partners, so what's your problems? Oh, we have a system, but it's not working. Okay, what do you need? What do you need from the system to do for you or to give you to help you do your job better? And many of the complaints was, oh, the system is not working. Are you using it within the system or a process map or a SOP? Do you have an SOP actually to use the system? And many of the programs, they see different systems or different tools or different softwares as this is the system itself. It's not just part of a process map that actually have to be used in a certain order and certain procedures. And last year, actually this year, I was in a country and I was supposed to deploy a system, a tool like Misma Core. And then I was looking at their previous data and I found there is a really huge anomalies that was striking to me. I was like, okay, can I see your SOP, please? And when I start looking at the SOPs, I found that there was a big problem with the SOP. It was not written for that specific country. So I told them that before I even start deploying anything or working with you on technical part, we need to fix that first, because there is not really a clear data flow where the data start, where to end. There is no QA for the data. There is no QC for the data. So even like, for me it was, I need to do a whole makeover. And the problem is people don't understand what's the value of business logic or even process maps, which is basic, and how valuable it's actually to improve their work themselves.
Yeah, it works. Thank you. So I will just take a higher level in the answer. I think it's really all about context and all this phase of analysis where you talk to people, you look at really concrete problems. It's really important to see what is going on now and with what people are struggling, because most of the time they are not asking for a Rolls-Royce. They just want a car that works. So we have to find a balance between the different criteria between feasibility, desirability, and technology.
So I'd just like to add that I think going in, I would try to, a lot of the assumptions being made in that situation may be wrong. So really sort of being able to step back, start from scratch and challenge what people are assuming. We found that especially in mapping, actually, people would often come to us with, I need something that does X, Y, Z. But when you get to the root cause of the problem, it can be a very long distance from where you're starting.
If I can just ask a question. I've worked on a number of agile, user-centric projects over the years, and the main constraint I see in the humanitarian sector is to get the initial buy-in by the organization. Everybody's really happy to hear about something that's going to be user-centric, but the person who pays the bill usually doesn't understand why they have a need, and at the end of the day they're going to get something different because a user has said that his need is different from the one who pays the bill is. So I'm just wondering, I mean, not that many organizations manage in the humanitarian sector to have agile projects, so how you guys managed to get the initial buy-in that you wanted?
That's actually a very tough question. I will say that I'm suffering already. Like I supposed to deploy a mobile application for one of our partners, and nothing to do with mine action. Actually, it's a monitoring mission. And any IM guy know that a mobile application it's not that difficult to deploy. It's, you know, there's so many tools available in the market. Today is actually 2 years since we start trying to deploy the mobile application for that organizations. And it's not the problem of the availability of the techniques or the resources or the willingness also of the higher management of that organization. It's actually bureaucracy, as simple as that. So fighting with bureaucracy, going with the procurement division or going with the security division or the people who design the firewalls or accessing or even the type of data that they need to collect. So you know, getting buy-in from different decision makers or even the stakeholders themselves is so complicated, and depend of how complex that organization is. You know, working with a small NGO is much easier, but working with a governmental agency, that's a different story, and working with an international big organization, that's even more complicated than, you know, organization. So you have a lot of cards that you can use to influence and to push the project itself difficult, and in different scenario, different cards. But you have to always, the most important thing is you have to have a buy-in from them, and without that, even if you have the Rolls-Royce system, they're not going to use it. And the buy-in is always complicated depending on the scenario and the country that you are working in.
I think I can add that it is, to answer your question, between people that are paying the bill and people that are really using the tool, it's a communication matter also. You really have, in an agile approach, have to explain step by step what are you trying to achieve now? Is it working? What are the feedbacks? And it is normal in an agile approach to make mistakes and start again, because you just want to build step by step solution and implementation. So the better advice to have is really communicate. Say that that is going to cost more, but don't say it when they receive the bill. Say to them like maybe before you are sending the bill.
So I think I'll tackle this in two parts about human-centered design. So I think one of the things to talk about then is the number of failed sort of tech projects. It's large. So actually you can pose it as a money saver. If you get the design right the first time, you're going to be saving a lot of money. In terms of an agile approach, I've sort of encountered this firsthand. And I think the best way there is show by doing. We were working on rolling out for the IFRC a global IT project. And they were looking at different vendors, and I just thought the prices were too much. So actually in 2 weeks, I built a basic prototype, which we demoed, that had some of the functionality that cost a fraction of the cost, and actually they went that route in the end. So it's about sort of starting these small fires around the organization, just trying to get the cultural change over long term. But it's not a quick flip, it's a long iterative battle as well.
You just need to have that first possibility of setting a fire somewhere.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if in the design processes you guys went through, if you had any, say, really unexpected outcomes of things you were not envisioning yourself this product would end up looking like. And yeah, just as an example, in many of our projects, we often find users really prioritize still paper and print maps and offline, whereas a lot of, say, the organizations based, say, in Europe in nice and cozy offices, let's say, tend to think more dashboards, digital, online type stuff.
So definitely the Welcome Trust project I started with, always in the back of your head, you sort of, with the initial value propositions, we had 25, and I definitely had the ones I thought were going to be a winner in my head, and none of those came true. So there's definitely a lot of unexpected ones. We were adding lots on the way. Like we had an initial scope of about 15, but 10 were added by the users, and actually one of those were the final project, so it did come from nowhere. And as well with the MSF project, they came in with, they actually contacted us because they were interested in using one of the products we had built before. So it was definitely something I believed in personally, but actually from our user research, we found it was completely inappropriate for this particular use case. So yeah, definitely through the process, we learn ourselves.
I would say, like, you know, at the beginning we started designing our own product and just force it to the user to use. And then I found it's better to give them the tools, teach them how to use the tools, and they will surprise you. They will surprise you beyond your imagination. I visit so many programs that I just give them some tools. I was like, wow, this is really nice dashboard. How did you build that? Or what it is? I was like, oh, you taught us. Me, I did, like, you know, and I was surprised. Like 2 years ago, I was a workshop, and I just explained some stuff, and people surprise you in a very positive way, you know. And I found that instead of actually give them something that is so solid, so rigid that, you know, does not give them everything. You know, just give them the tools, build that with them, instead of wasting time in designing something that they will not use after 6 months or 1 year, and you have to keep following with them. So I'm more in training, building capacity actually than the user themselves. You know, give them simple tools. You don't have to have, you know, a programmer or a JavaScript developer with you all the time. You know, just build the dashboard, and I found it much more interactive and more productive, and you get much more buy-in from the users.
Well, I can finish just to say that in the initialization phase where we are now, of course, there was so much inputs that came from the workshop, from the survey, where we left also comment parts where people could explain what they were expecting or what did they understand or not understand. And the challenge is always to say, okay, is it just one idea, or is it something that could really be a main requirement that we didn't see in our business case at the beginning, or it is not in our mandate, for instance, but we think that we have to go through. So when we spotted those kinds of requirements, then you have to go more workshops with other persons just to go and continue and continue. And so it's at what point you have to a little bit stop and focus on the right parts. But if you talk to enough people, then you hope that you tackled at least the main requirements.
Thank you. I have two small questions. The first one is related to, we were talking about users, but I still do not understand where the so-called affected population in humanitarian crisis fit within the picture. So I'm not clear when you're talking about the users, who are those users? And we have just one category of users, because for me, a tool, a product, or an information set can have different users, and this implies also sometimes some training, some translation, some adaptation. If you could clarify a bit or give some concrete examples of who are the users of the different products you have experimented.
Well, when I describe users, I'm talking about the stakeholders, and that's any people usually who's affected by any program. So, for example, like from Mine Action, we have different type of users. So what I mean by users, anybody who can get information that affect his life or daily life, or information that he help him build up the project. So a user could be the operator themselves, the guys who go to the clearance. The users could be, for us, at least in Mine Action, the users could be a ministry that are planning to conduct an activity. A user could be, you know, like the story with hot maps, for example. They have a lot of tasks, and they have different people who actually request maps. So anybody who requests a map, that could be a user. Also, For example, in Croatia, if you want to go hunting, you need to go in the forest. So there's actually a website. You can actually see which forests you can have been cleared or not. So all the public are users if they can find use that information.
But you have some prerequisites. You have to have access. So the map is somewhere in the web. So you need a computer, a mobile device. My point is this one, the border where those people who don't have access to those technologies, who are not capable of reading a map, it's not easy. It's something you have to learn. So I mean, there are different languages used for providing and sharing information. And so I'm entering a bit in the anthropological side of the user, what we call a user, and we can have very different users, and we can have also people affected by a crisis. We were discussing another workshop, a very interesting experience of mapping the boundaries of a camp in Bangladesh. And I was wondering if MSF shared the information also with the refugee population itself, or the users are only us, basically, and the ministries, etc. That was more my question.
Well, because it's an MSF-related question, I think you can, it's really difficult in an emergency cases to think exactly about the technical part or the different devices that are going to be used in the field that are not actually printed paper. So in the field, you have, if you want to communicate, you might not use the direct map to communicate a message, but you will maybe work more with infographics and explaining to them, okay, you are here, you have to walk 300 meters in that direction, and you put an arrow to say, okay, that is the direction, because you don't know how to read a map or really put into place. It is difficult actually with our project. We are not tackling those are out of our stakeholder, because you can not expect them to have the tools, available technological tools, and it is part of MSF staff to help them to achieve what they need as an information, but they won't have it from our platform or our system.
So I think you're right in identifying that the products that we're displaying here are sort of for the internal stakeholders of our organization, but there's always going to be some information that has to be internal. But there's definitely information there that could be used by beneficiary, other users. And I think beneficiary communications is an expanding field, and we could definitely work closer with them to learn how we can feed into the stuff they're producing as well. I think you're right.
I just need to add a little bit, because now I think I understand the question more. One of the things that we do in Mine Action is collect information about hazards area, correct? And the conflict or the crisis have different stages, where you have the emergency situation and then you have the development stages that happen after. And the information that we collect now using the tools and the reporting mechanism for the people or the current user that are using it, they're specific or internal, like in the system. But this data is there and being collected and sitting on a server somewhere. Once we are in the development stages, the users are different now, but the data is still there. So for example, I'll give you an example. Like, you're from London, and in London, for example, if you want to go and build a house, if you're rich enough and have a plot of land and you want to build it, I hope one day you will be. So you go to the municipality and submit a request to do demolishing of the building, that existing building, to erect a new one. And there is a department there that tell you, okay, you're gonna do that, please let us know exactly the date that you're gonna demolish, and we will send you a team to monitor with you. You go to start demolishing, the team will arrive, you start demolishing. At a certain moment they tell you, please stop. Move all your people out of that area. They will go inside. There's a bomb that was dropped in the Second World War. They will go and dispose of it. That information was collected in the 40s and is still there as being used. So I would say there is a time limit depending on the user, and it changes as long as we have the data.
And one part of the mandate that we already have is saying we take a lot of data from open source part and how we contribute back. So that's also something that we're tackling more in the background. How we contribute back the non-sensitive data, because actually a lot of the data that we are collecting are not always sensitive data. So how we contribute back when we have, again, internet connectivity, because with information systems like geographic information systems, it is difficult to give back without connectivity.
Hello. Sorry, that was a bit dramatic. So you mentioned a couple of different methodologies that you've used for the design process. And as you were speaking, I was thinking, okay, this reminds me of experience from a startup incubator where I can't remember the name of the methodology, but this kind of user-centered design. I mean, you mentioned this diamond process from the British Design Council. Are there any really useful methodologies you would suggest?
So we use that one as sort of our overarching framework, but we actually, every contract, we come up with new activities that we think are most relevant to that. The main thing I would say, though, is always do activity-based interviews and workshops. It really opens up the ideas and the scope of what people talk about. But we actually, come up with bespoke activities every single time.
Any other questions?
Hi, I would like to know MSF and Mine Action. How long did it take for the gathering of user requirements? Because maybe I didn't hear it, but I think you didn't say. And I just wanted to add, I'm a user-centered designer and researcher. And so I think that user-centric design is a real opportunity for humanitarian and development tools, and essentially for the open source community. So I wanted to know your more general point of view upon the existing open source tools and their usability. So this question is more for Heqco. And if you had some project related to that.
Thank you. So we took the time with the GeoMSF project to do gathering phases analysis of 6 months. And we just have to see that during these 6 months we've done an outreach of more than 140 contacts within the different MSF headquarters and in the field. So it was a time that we think was worth to invest, because like that you also not only work on the user design approach, but also of all the change management and the awareness and explaining why we are here, and actually also talking about just geographic information system, why it is important, why you should use it, and why we think that it's worth to invest this time. And I'm really looking forward to have next year really a concrete tools to show to prove that the approach was the right one. We actually also maybe I went a bit quickly on the usability competitive analysis or comparative analysis, where we also worked with someone coming from the user-centric approach, where you can see what are the lessons learned of how a platform is made intuitive, is made easy to understand. You want user to go inside to, in 5 minutes, understand, okay, here I can do those 5 points, I will find what I need, and I can work through that. So we put user-centric inside the process, and I'm also looking forward to talk to you afterwards to see what you think about it.
In terms of Mine Action, is much simpler than MSF. Of course, we have the structure kind of set up since 20 years and been evolving. What we did actually, the biggest challenge was actually to identify what are the set of standard indicators, the minimum indicators that everybody use. And starting from that, we deal with each scenario, each country differently. So we work with them designing forms that they need. And with each question, we ask them, what type of data, what are the use of that question. If you collect that information, how are you going to use it? And we do all different iteration with them. We give them the set of the form that we have. They try it. They come back to us. Okay, we need to add more question. We need to remove something. It depends on different program to program. Some program already have. They know exactly what they want, so it's easy to build up that, that form or the setting. And some countries they still evolving and developing. Like in Syria, for example, it took them more than 2 years just to agree on a set of forms. While if you look at Afghanistan, they're really mature. They know exactly what they want, and we try to include a little bit workflow within the questionnaire themselves or the form that they fill themselves. And eventually, this is something they understand that they're going to use, and we just try to help them or just walk with them that path until we get something that they agree on. So it's an ongoing process. I will not say that we just design it one time and that's it. No, we can always develop it and improve it as we go on.
So to touch on the second question, I'd say usability is definitely neglected in the open source community. Even at the level of just say simple documentation, like I have 100 GitHub repositories, but really only 10 of those are usable by other people. There's a big funding gap actually in the open source community. Even big communities, we spoke to people running Jupyter Notebook, and even they're struggling. It's got over 1 million users, and they're struggling to get the funding they need each year with funding being pulled. So it's definitely a neglected area. I don't know what the solution is. The business models don't quite exist for all open source software yet, and it generally gets prioritized for a few users who provide the funding, maybe a few corporate sort of partners who are choosing the feature set rather than what would be better for the whole community. So I don't think there's a good answer there yet.
Thank you for taking this part of the question.
Thank you. Maybe one last question, or it's time for lunch. Thank you very much for the very, this debate was very qualitative, so I really appreciate it. I learned a lot of things, I hope you too. So if you want to talk to, you are around today, Pauline, Simon, and Suleiman, so if you want to continue the discussion, please feel free. Bon appétit, and see you later. Thank you again.